The paranormal is an enigma. Since the dawn of our species, things that seem outside the realm of understanding have been dubbed supernatural. Over time, science have helped us measure, predict, and quantify this reality, yet there are still unsolved mysteries and unexplained phenomena that plague our attempts to rationalize this world. Ghost sightings, near-death experiences, and the psychic phenomenon, just to name a few, are among the subjects science dismisses as flaws in perception, hallucinations, and outright delusions. During this program, we attempt to bridge the gap between diverse viewpoints and air out the opinions of experienced individuals in the fields of investigation, metaphysics, and skepticism. Welcome to the Supernatural Symposium. Hello, and welcome to the Supernatural Symposium. I am your host, Justin Brown, and we are going to be talking about hauntings tonight. Of course, we're going to have a very diverse panel talking about this very controversial subject. You know how we roll. We get a paranormal investigator, we get a psychic, and we get a skeptic. And we try to bridge gaps and find common ground and try to understand where each diverse opinion is coming from and try to strengthen the paranormal community through this type of dialogue in this format. So far so good. It's episode 3, and I'm really happy from the feedback that we got so far. If you don't mind and you like what you're seeing, please share it everywhere and invite your friends to come along. If this is the first time you've watched this show, this is how it works. If you have a question for our guests, just be patient. We have chat moderators that will jot down your question, and we will ask the panel individually what they all three think. It's going to be a little bit crazy talking to three people about the same thing, and sometimes conversations get organic. So let's just roll with it tonight. Let's bring the gang on. We got Benjamin Radford. What's up, buddy? Are you ready to talk about hauntings tonight? Awesome. I'm really thankful that you're on here. I've been trying to reach out to skeptics. They're a little bit hard because you got to kind of reach out to the community, but I appreciate coming on, and I'm very much looking forward to getting your feedback. Tiffaney Mason. She's going to be our metaphysicist, aka psychic, tonight. Are you ready to talk about hauntings, Tiffaney?
Have me on the show.
All right. I'm sorry, I forgot to unmute you guys, but now we can hear you. Michael, you investigate the paranormal a little bit, right?
Yeah, just a little bit.
Just a little bit. All right.
A little bit.
So we get to hear from skeptics, from psychics, and from a guy that tries to stay on the fence all the time. So I'm very happy that you got to come back on the show. Shauna made me ask you this time, so you can thank her for coming back.
Oh, okay. This is Shauna's fault, huh?
Well, I happened to show my dislike for a certain person in the paranormal field, and I think I gained a new friend.
Oh, okay. Very cool. Very cool.
So,
Gotcha.
I'm happy to have you guys on. What we're going to talk about this evening is hauntings, and it's kind of going to be a general topic. We're going to talk about why people experience hauntings. Is it in the mind? Is it an actual real thing? What causes hauntings? You know, what are the major stories? What's the draw? What's the fascination? All that good stuff. But before we do that, make sure that you're commenting if you want to shout it out, because we're going to try to do some shout outs. Please try to keep it clean in the comments, no trolling, be respectful and all that. Let's start it off with Ben. Kind of let the viewers know what your credentials are, what you do in the paranormal field as a skeptic.
Sure. My name is Ben Radford, as you said. My credentials are: I have a bachelor's degree in psychology, a master's degree in education. I've written 10 books. Most recently, a book titled "Investigating Ghosts: The Scientific Search for Spirits." And that's sort of a culmination of what I've learned in investigating hauntings and ghosts in many cases around the world, particularly in North America, also in the Caribbean and elsewhere. So I try to approach ghost investigation from a multidisciplinary angle. Part of it is investigating, actually trying to figure out what's actually going on. Part of it is the psychology, and I'm also a member of the American Folklore Society. So a lot of it's informed with understanding how folklore works and how stories are spread and things like that.
Awesome. So a little bit more. I want to ask you a kind of a question to set the tone. What is it? Is it in the culture? Is it in the mind? Is it a mixture of the two? Based on your research and your years of experience, what is it about hauntings and ghosts and the archetype of that subject matter? What makes it interesting to you, and maybe why is it so much of a widespread interest throughout our culture and many others?
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. The reason it's particularly interesting to me is that, we have this phenomena that is widespread, right? People all over the world report ghosts. It's cross-cultural all over the place. And of course, going back centuries and in some cases millennia. So ghost belief is universal. What's interesting to me about that is the fact that despite it's being universal, despite people actually having researched ghosts and tried to investigate ghosts for well over 100 years, you can go back to the 1800s with the Society for Psychical Research in England. Despite all that, despite all the ghost hunters and TV shows and all of that, we still don't have good hard evidence of ghosts. We still don't know for sure what a ghost is. There's all these different opinions, different experiences, different hypotheses. Some people think it's this, some people think it's that. So that's really what I find most interesting, is that there's these entities that are so well known, and everybody has their own ideas what ghosts are, and yet we still don't have good hard scientific evidence for that. So that's what intrigues me, is how can it be that they're everywhere and yet they're nowhere? And so I look at it and I say, okay, well, either people are experiencing, either ghosts are real in the sort of capital R way, and they really are out there, and they're being seen and recorded and videotaped and those other things. And then the question is, well, why, if these things are real, then why haven't we found better evidence of them? On the other hand, if they're not real, if most of the what people consider to be ghost experiences are in fact misunderstandings or misperceptions or mistakes, then the question is still fascinating, which is, why are people interpreting these things as ghosts? So either way, it's a fascinating topic.
Absolutely. And I'm looking forward to diving into this, and specifically, hauntings in general. So let's move over to Tiffaney. Tiffaney, of course, I introduced your name. Let us know what you do specifically in the paranormal field. What, kind of start with how you got started, your origin story, and how it brought you to today.
Okay. So obviously my name's Tiffaney. I have experienced the paranormal since I was a young girl. When I was a child, I used to talk to my grandparents, who were actually on the other side, and my mama told me, they're just dead, they won't hurt you, go back to bed. Okay, cool, fine. And then I got into first grade, and that led to a home visit. So then my mom was like, yeah, we just keep this on the down low. And as I got older, I did my best to try and blend in. Nobody wants to be the lone girl at the 6th grade sleepover going, who's the strange man in the doorway that nobody else sees? So I did my best to turn it off, tune it out, just ignore that it existed, and go on about my business. And then when I got in my early 20s, it kind of became a parlor trick. I would use it to scare my friends, which I got a good laugh out of. But my husband goes, you have this gift for a reason. Maybe you're supposed to be helping people with this. I didn't really consider it, and I don't like public speaking. It makes me very nervous. I decided to go public in 2009, and I have established myself through word of mouth ever since. And I have been able to help people, show them that there's more to death than just being in a box or on someone's mantle. So that's why I do what I do. Yeah.
That's awesome. Do you do readings? Kind of elaborate on what role you play with the community in and outside the paranormal.
I do readings for people in public. I meet all clients in a public location, and I do try my best to meet halfway so no one has to travel too far. I can see, hear, and talk to the dead, so sometimes I see them as clear as I see y'all, and other times I can hear them without physically seeing them, but I still can communicate with them.
Yeah, that right there has always interested me. My mother is definitely, very similar to what all the stuff you're describing, and I have to take her word for it, but she has definitely not let me down when it comes to providing me supporting evidence of it. So it's definitely a deep fascination for me. So I'm looking forward to hearing your opinions on hauntings and ghosts tonight. We're going to switch over there to Mike Ricksecker. Buddy, you got the mic. Let the viewers know who you are, what you're about, how you got started, and where you are now.
That's a lot. How much time do you have?
3 minutes, go.
3 minutes. All right. Mike Ricksecker, author and ghostorian. Been involved some way, shape, or form with the paranormal field for about the last 25 years. Have a number of books to my credit. Haunted Road Media is a book publishing company, so I publish other authors. It's also a video production company, so we have our own YouTube channel where we post all kinds of paranormal investigations, ghost story videos, live stream videos like this, what have you. Got my start really, I was kind of thrust into it. I had my first paranormal experience when I was a child. It's a shadow person story that I tell all the time. A little bit different because it actually physically interacted with me. Crossed my arms across my body and then ran off down the hall and all this stuff. And it's a little bit different because, people try to talk about the sleep paralysis aspect of it. It's like, well, I wasn't really paralyzed because my arms are moving, my head's turning, watching down the hall. So it was very different. It was an actual experience. Following that, had one additional shadow person experience when I was young, when I was 13. And my first paranormal investigation, really didn't know what the heck I was doing. Really, it was when I was 15 years old, when a friend of mine, we were just hanging out. I was like, oh, I think my room is haunted. And all of a sudden we boxed out. We basically did a paranormal investigation of her house, even though we had no idea that that's what we were doing at the time. But I've always been absolutely fascinated. Call myself a ghostorian because I dive really deep into the historic aspect of the locations that we go to, the spirits that we're investigating there. So, ghost and historian put together. So that's kind of the tinge of a lot of my books, like Ghosts in Maryland, Ghosts and Legends of Oklahoma. You get a lot of the historic aspect as well as the hauntings, all that. It's not just things that go bump in the night. And then with our Encounters with Paranormal series, that book there through Haunted Road Media, one of the things that we're doing with that is part of those proceeds go to help haunted historic locations that are featured within that book. So we're giving back to the community in that way.
That's awesome, Mike. I haven't known you for a long time, but since I've known you, I've always been a fan. I love getting to know people that are just as engrossed in the paranormal as I am. So happy to have you on, buddy. And I'm looking forward to this. This is going to be very interesting. Hopefully we can stay on topic and really dig in tonight, because rarely we get the opportunity to have such a diverse panel. So, all right. Real quick, Missy, go ahead and go first. Do some shout outs. If you're overwhelmed with how many viewers we have, that's okay. But go ahead and do some shout outs real quick.
Okay. We have Bill, we have Derek, we have Joshua Mervis, Pauletta Cook, Cassandra Jimmins, Michael Newman, Zira Dunn, Debbie Sanders, Live Paranormal is watching. We have Josh Bender, Heather Elliott, Mary Sturgis, Sandy Griffin, Debbie, I don't even know how to pronounce her name, and I would totally butcher it. Laura Brownlow, Jim Rainey, Ima Kinger, Alan Boykin, Donald Hayes, and the only thing anybody has said so far is Mike sounds hollow.
He sounds hollow. Okay.
I'm the hollow man.
All right, I see some
Coming to
questions.
screens in February. The Hollow Man starring Mike.
I see some questions coming in, but we're going to hold off on them. If you have to write them down or do whatever you need to do, just hold on to them. We're going to come back to them. Jess, go ahead and shout out YouTube.
Sure. Tim Schoen, Sean Gilmore, Scotty Fox, Val, Heath Edwards, Glenda Holding, and Eric Weiss.
All right. Thanks very much for joining us, everybody. We're going to try to make this a one for the books. Any questions on YouTube for the panel yet?
Yes. Scotty had one. It says, question for the panel. What do they think about Skinwalker Ranch, which crosses over a number of phenomena?
Skinwalker Ranch. Ben, do you know anything about Skinwalker Ranch? And if you do, what's your take on it?
I know a little bit about Skinwalker Ranch. I'm actually here in New Mexico, so it's not too far away from where we are now. When you start getting into Native American lore, as Skinwalkers are, it's always a little dicey in terms of sort of cultural appropriation, things like that. From what I've looked into, there are sort of lots of claims, but sort of little hard evidence. Lots of wild stories. But of course, it's private, so you can't just wander in and check things all you want. So I have not done any personal investigations there, so I can't speak from personal experience. But my general sense is that there's lots of wild claims, little in terms of hard evidence coming out about it. But others may disagree.
Whoops, hold on, I gotta switch back here. Okay, from a skeptical point of view and from a psychological point of view, what do you think is the significance, the cultural significance of something like that, when it comes to folklore? Is it just passed on? Do you think people are still seeing these things? And if they're not still seeing these things, why are they still reporting them?
Well, yeah, it's you can look at ghosts from a folkloric point of view, which is one of the things I like to bring to it, and that's where it gets really interesting, right? You look at urban legends, you look at the Slender Man stories, you look at, for example, La Llorona here in New Mexico, where you have this Hispanic ghost, this woman that drowned her children. And in the small village where I grew up here in New Mexico, you would hear stories that they would say, don't go near the river, because I live near the Rio Grande River, and they would say, don't go near the river because La Llorona will get you. And the story is that if you listen closely on moonless nights, to the wind, you would hear her wailing for her children. So she's out there crying because she drowned her children, and there's a whole story behind that. And so that's one thing I really find that's one thing that's really interesting, is looking at the folkloric aspects of it. From La Llorona to the Vanishing Hitchhiker, Bloody Mary. There's all these incarnations of ghosts, and the ways that we sort of play with it. But one of the implications of that is that we sort of inherit ghost stories. We have personal experiences that we can't necessarily put a finger on or a label on. And that's why, for example, when Tiffaney was talking earlier about how she would have this weird experience and her mother would frame it for her, she would say, you just had this weird thing. This is what that is, right? That's your grandma from the other side, whatever else. And so we have these weird things happen to us. We all do. It's normal, natural. And then we have somebody come to us and say, oh, I can explain that. That is X. That is a ghost. That is this. That is that. And there's nothing wrong with that. And that's a big part of folklore. But it can also lead people astray. So I'll give you a quick example. When I lived in Buffalo for 10 years, I did a haunted house investigation. I wrote it in one of my books, and it was this family, and they were a mother and a father and a young daughter, and they were terrified to be in their own house at night. And they actually called a skeptic, or they called a psychic first, who basically confirmed their worst fears. And they told me, your house is full of demons and ghosts, and they were terrified. They refused to be there overnight. And then they called me, and I did an actual investigation. And there are a bunch of weird claims. I won't go into them, but basically it was interesting talking to them, because when I do ghost investigations, one of the first things I ask people is, why do you think there is a ghost? I'm not saying there's not a ghost. I want to know why that's your interpretation. And in this particular case, she said, well, I saw these TV shows, Ghost Hunters, Ghost Adventures, and all these other sorts of things. And she had seen these things on TV and these experts, or what she thought were experts, doing these investigations. And she said, oh, yeah, I had that weird thing. I go into this weird part of the house, this and that. And to be honest, it actually made my job more difficult, because I was trying to explain the phenomena they're experiencing through science-based empirical investigation. And they're like, yeah, but on TV they do this. I said, yeah, but that's TV. That's you need to, you can't take what's on TV too literally. And so it was actually difficult, because I've basically had to clean up the mess left by people like the Ghost Hunters, who they basically mislead people. Anything bad in your house is a demon, anything unexplained, and that can actually do damage to people. And oftentimes it's skeptics like me and others as well, Joe Nickel and Kenny Bill and whoever else, that have to need to go in there after this and say, okay, well, maybe this isn't really a demon, maybe this isn't really a ghost. There may be other explanations for it.
Yeah, that's you bring up an interesting point about the TV shows and the pulp culture that we're all subjected to. People are obsessed with it. They don't realize the impact and influence it has on everyone all the time. So it does make, our jobs much more harder when it comes to actually figuring the stuff out and trying to give a more objective thing. So that's awesome that you brought that up. Tiffany, have you heard about the Skinwalker Ranch? And if so, what's your take on it? Tiffany, you are muted.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. I actually have heard about the Skinwalker Ranch. It was on an episode of Ghost Adventures last week or so, and so I was scrolling through the channels. I don't know much about it other than it's a Native American legend. And I almost wonder if it's akin to skinwalkers, or shapeshifters, rather. Mm-hmm. How medicine men stories were told how they would embody the wolf or, the horse or whatever. So I wondered if maybe it was like the same thing, but past that, I really don't know anything about it.
Right, and me trying to remember back to that episode of Ghost Adventures, they were trying to throw a UFO alien twist on it too, right?
Yes.
Which makes it...
I love the kitchen sink approach, right? Okay, well, let's throw in the Loch Ness Monster. Oh, there's Spring Heel Jack. Oh, there's oh, really? Mothman again? Can't it just be a regular ghost?
No, it's boring. All right, that's cool. Go ahead, Tiffany.
I have to say something real quick to Ben. I want to say, when you had mentioned what makes you think it's a ghost, that is such an excellent question to ask. And I love people who have that approach, because in all honesty, if someone came up to me and said, I see dead people, I'd be like, okay, let's ask about this. But the fact that you approach it like that, I appreciate that coming from doing what I do. So that's awesome. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Oh, we're off to a good start. Mike, anything to add on Skinwalker Ranch?
Yeah, I mean, as far as Skinwalker, I haven't been out to Skinwalker Ranch, so I've kind of skimmed over a little bit. I do get asked from time to time about Skinwalkers, because people want to know if they are shadow people, because I talk a lot about shadow people and have a whole presentation and all that. So, I mean, possibly related, but not exactly the same thing. They definitely have different characteristics. So, I mean, I'm not a Skinwalker expert or anything like that, so I can't speak too much to it. But yeah, just to kind of piggyback off of Ben and Tiffany there, and I also get hit up with I had a candlestick fall off the mantle. Is it a demon sort of thing? And so it is difficult. And of course, like the aliens and all that getting mixed in with Skinwalker, it is very difficult how TV pop culture has integrated all these different ideas into the mainstream like that. I will give them some credit, because it has opened people's minds to the supernatural and other realms and what have you. So people who were previously timid or scared to come forward and say, well, I had this experience, because 50, 60 years ago, you say something like that, you're going to get locked up. I heard some voices. No, you're going to get put away. So now it's a little bit more accepting to say, well, I've had these experiences. And so I do appreciate that that it's allowed people to come forward, but at the same token, they're feeding people false information. So now I'm coming forward, I've had this experience, and now I think it's this because I saw it on TV. So it's good and bad at the same time.
Right. It's, it makes things more interesting. I do like the point that you brought up, that it kind of makes people ask more questions, makes them wonder and curious more, but at the same time, you can be influenced by what they report or what they convey about a location or a certain type of paranormal phenomena. So you have to be careful. But I do like, what you said, and I think it's a double-edged sword there, and we can probably talk about that in more depth. Missy, what's the best question that you have for these folks on Facebook?
Well, I only have one.
Okay.
And if I read it exactly how he worded it, I don't even know if you're going to be able to make heads or tails of it. The way he typed it was, "We are they when they cross over."
Okay. Where do they go when they cross over? I
guess that was his question, yes.
Okay. Let's go to Tiffaney on this one. What's your belief on where people, if they, transcend death, if the spirit, exists after death, where do they go?
So my encounter with the people that have crossed over, they have their own cycle that they must complete before they reach heaven or whatever higher power you believe in. There's grief, there's anger, there's sorrow, there's elation, there's all of these to get to the top. Now, so far, none of the spirits that I have encountered have ever said that they've met one divine being. That's not to say that they don't exist, but that they have never encountered it. What I have encountered is their version of heaven. I will just call it heaven. Their version of heaven is wherever they were happiest here on earth. A lot of the times it's a favorite house that they had, or a piece of property, or one guy was sitting on a dock on a cooler drinking Coors Light. It is whatever made them happiest here. Yeah.
All right, hold on here. My video has froze up. I got to figure out why, but people can hear me. So that was all the questions on Facebook?
Yes, that's the only question I have.
All right.
I do have one on YouTube.
Okay, go ahead and ask.
Okay, this is from Val. Question for the panel: what do you define haunting as, and what are some of your experiences?
Let's go to Ben with this one.
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. When I was researching my last book, Investigating Ghosts, one of the things I was actually surprised to, I kind of knew it, but I was surprised to sort of rediscover, is just how varied interpretations are. As I'm sure the other panelists know, there isn't a single definition of ghosts. Some people believe that ghosts are ethereal projections from other places. Some people believe that ghosts are basically residual hauntings where a person will reenact something that happened before. There's probably 5 or 6 different definitions of ghosts that I could come off the top of my head, which in a way is kind of weird, right? I mean, as I began, we have ideas of what ghosts are. They're in movies, they're in TV, they're in our folklore, they're in our stories. People report seeing them. They're all over the place, and yet we can't go to a museum and poke at one and wave at it and know for the fact it's there. And so it's such a slippery. And I don't mean that in a Slimer way, but it's such a slippery thing, right? So I can't really give you a definition of ghost. What I can tell you is that to me, a ghost, in most of my investigations, a ghost is a label for an experience. That is, somebody has something weird happen to them. They had a feeling of being watched, or a comforting feeling like a loved person was watching over them, or they were in some haunted place or on a ghost town or wherever else, and they had some weird experience that they couldn't explain. And from an investigative point of view, that's what a ghost is. It's a label for an experience. But keep in mind that experience may or may not in fact be a ghost. Just because people say, "Oh, that's a ghost," well, that doesn't really tell you anything. There was research done by a sociologist named Dennis Waskul, Waskul, and he did an interesting book, came out a couple years back. And what you find is there's actually a wide variety of things that people claim as ghosts. And so, I can go into a room and I can say, who here believes in ghosts or has experienced a ghost? And you'll have 20 people raise their hand and you'll get 15 different interpretations. One person will say, well, yeah, by a ghost, I saw a full-bodied apparition come up and speak to me. Another person will say, there's a ghost in my house and he moves my keys now and then. Another person will say, "Oh, well, there's there's this feeling in the back of my head," and so there's just an incredibly wide variety of phenomena sort of lumped together as a ghost. So, for me personally, a ghost is a label for an experience that I can hopefully investigate and come to the conclusion about.
Right. We kind of we fill in the blank because we don't really know, but we're told through word of mouth. Culturally, we believe in such things could exist, and like you said, we just don't know because there's no tangible physical proof of it. So that that is the conundrum that we face. Mike, let's go over here to Mike. What is your definition of a haunting? How do you know if you are experiencing or dealing with a haunting?
Yeah, well, you take a look at the word haunt and the way we use it. It's not just it doesn't always have to do with ghosts. We talk about when we go to our old neighborhood in which we grew up, and you talk about visiting your old haunts. Well, you're not a ghost. You're a physical human being. You're going back to locations in which you used to frequent, in which you used to hang out. So a haunting is some sort of, kind of like Ben was saying, some sort of interaction that you're having there at a certain location that is frequently having this sort of activity. Yeah, you could say ghost is a bit of a label. I mean, to me, it's people. You're interacting with people. You just can't see them all the time. Occasionally, you might be able to pick up on one or what have you. Some people are able to see them better than others, and we're still trying to figure out why that is. But yeah, a haunting in the classical sense can be a number of different things. We talk about a residual haunt. Again, it's whatever this energy is that is frequenting this location, and so that's the haunt is the location. But yeah, as far as the ghosts or spirits or what have you, those that are what we usually call like an intelligent spirit. I mean, they're just people. They're having a different experience without a physical body than we are, but they're still there. And so, that's why when we go into a location that is, presumed to be haunted, and we're trying to discover if it really is or not, and maybe we start to encounter something, we treat whatever or whomever that may be with respect, because they are people. And if I was standing there talking to somebody that I could physically see, I would still be very respectful of that.
Right. And what's interesting to me about why we believe in what why we experience these things and why we just label it a haunting is we'll have that first experience, and we like to label things. We like to put a stamp on them so we don't have to deal with coping of not knowing what it is. Like there's some anxiety there. So for me personally, when I grew up in this house and these things start happening and I'm young, I don't understand, and I'm frightful of the possibility of ghosts and hauntings. And then my mother comes along, kind of like we were talking before, this is what it is. And I'm like, okay, it can't be that. What if she's crazy? What if she's wrong? But then something else comes along and gives you all the supporting evidence of it. And that's when your brain kind of forms what your definition of it is, and then you might become biased, right? You might become biased at that point, and now you're trying to validate those, that one thing to happen with other things. So it becomes interesting and difficult to not be biased, and I think that might be one of the hardest things that we have to deal with as investigators and people who are trying to pursue what's actually happening out there. So it's tough. It's really tough.
Yeah, it is, and especially for a child, people generally fear what they don't understand. And as a child, when all these different things are going on and you don't usually see something, you don't understand it. Or it may be that you do actually see something. Maybe you see somebody at the foot of your bed and mom or dad doesn't see that, and you are not understanding why they don't see this person in your room. So, there's that whole fear of lack of understanding that goes on. And then there's the whole, the world perspective and our culture. And it's still, frowned on it in a lot of places where, if you're talking about ghosts and spirits and what have you, that there is a bit of a negative connotation with that, even though it's become more mainstream these days. It's still not in a lot of other ways too. And so you're always dealing with that bias, seems like any way you turn.
Yeah. And you can't leave out, you could just be nuts. You could have a mental disorder and it's just, you can't escape it. And
it's a little bit different than actually experiencing something that's truly there, but
but people tend to hallucinate and have delusions, and I just thought I threw that out there too. Tiffany, do you have anything to add to this question?
I have to just say, when Ben said you can't go to a museum and poke it or prod it, on the internet now, somebody's going to pop up with a glass vial with some slime or something in there and go, I have a ghost. Come check it out. So
I'm sure that's happening right now.
You should probably patent that before it does.
I know. Somebody get on that.
No, I think what needed to be said was covered. I agree with a lot of it. It's nice having a skeptic's point of view as well as an investigator. I mean, there's two sides of every coin, kind of like there's life and death. So I very much appreciate hearing everyone's side to it. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad that, you're here to kind of, to add your flavor and your take on things. And, it always interests me what, psychics and metaphysicists, because there's a very large spectrum of abilities and claims that people have. And just to get someone's, you're not a young woman. I'm not saying you're old, but you have experience and a journey that you've been through, and you still believe that you have this ability and you're dealing with spirits and, aspects of people's consciousness that once lived. So,
Now, I have a question for you, though. You said you thought your mom was crazy. Did you ever tell her she was crazy?
All the time.
See, in any good medium or psychic worth their salt, we always crave credibility, basically validation, because we tend to deal with the realm that's not seen, that's not felt, that's not really documented. So whenever I have a client that comes back to me however long later and says, oh, by the way, I did some research and this is what I found out, I'm like, oh, okay, maybe I'm not as crazy as I thought. But, you could ask my husband, he'd be like, nope, she's off her rocker. But, there's something to be said for that.
I'm going to tell you a story. This is what happens all the time with my mother. I was estranged from her for like 10 years until this last year. And I started bringing her to paranormal investigations, okay? Because, I want to know what she thinks, if she picks up on anything. I bring her in blind. I don't tell her nothing. Treat her like a mushroom. Yeah. I throw her in my car, and I take her, I film her, walk through, and I say, go away. And I just cross-check that with stuff that we find, for research purposes. We were at a location this last year in 2018. She's going up the steps, and she says this entity is lobbing decapitated heads down the stairs, and they're rolling down the stairs like, tomatoes would just, flop, flop, flop. And she's like, do you hear that? And I'm like, no, I don't see anything. I don't hear anything. So when I go to review the video, she's standing over here on my left shoulder, and we're reviewing it. And I swear to God, this is going to be on my YouTube channel soon. You hear the flopping, and she's standing still. I'm standing there with the camera still, and you hear it. And I'm like, okay. I was hoping she was crazy. When she said this, she sounded crazy. She looked crazy. But there's supporting evidence of maybe not so crazy there. So That's happened.
You heard heads bouncing downstairs? That is cool.
Yes,
I want to look into that. I
will. You be the first one to see it because I want to know what you think. All right. So yeah.
So we were at Post Town. Well, I was at Post Town Schoolhouse. I don't know. Are you familiar with Post Town Schoolhouse?
Been there a lot. I live an hour away from it.
Okay, right. So the first time I went, I'm like, there is nothing here. Mind you, it was in the daylight. I'm like, yeah, there's some residual stuff. A lot of things happen here. But as for hauntings, right? So on New Year's Eve, I was with a couple of investigators and we were up in the hallway. And I saw a little boy standing there, which to my knowledge, there's no record of students dying on the property. I could be wrong. I never did my research on it. But to my knowledge, there's no deaths. Well, I saw this little boy, and all of a sudden I heard the principal's coming. And I was like, what? And on the recorder, because my friend was recording with his phone, so it was like a video and audio. You hear me go, what? And then he plays it back, and you hear footsteps coming. Mm-hmm. And I was like, holy smokes, because I never get audio evidence like that. So the people who catch EVPs, I'm like, this is great. I don't know how you guys do it. But it really confirmed me. I was like, huh. So I don't know. And this is kind of a question I don't know if I can pose, but do you guys think that people can bring in stuff? So maybe not necessarily the location starts out haunted, but by the legions of people going there, can it turn into an attraction, or can they bring things with them that then in turn makes it haunted?
That's a very good question. And in the parapsychological field, they talk about something called psychokinetics. And, it's kind of like a theory that would describe and explain stuff like poltergeists and entities visually and all kinds of manifestations. We could talk about that, see what Ben and Mike think about it.
Yeah.
What do you think, Mike? How would you answer Tiffany?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think people can bring stuff along with them. Some people have attachments and they bring that along with them, and so it's not a haunted location. Like, people will move from house to house to house. It's like, it's haunted, I'm leaving. It's haunted, I'm leaving. Mm-hmm. But it's actually the person that's haunted, and that's why they continually, as they move from place to place. So, somebody could go to a haunted location with an attachment already and be getting all this activity and different types of activity that is normally reported there. There's also the chance, I believe, that as we have all these people that are coming to this location, like you were saying, and they're calling out, trying to communicate with spirits, calling out. So you're sending this, vibration out to the universe that almost becomes like a beacon. Hey, there's people here that want to communicate with that realm. Come on over. So I think that that energy does build there, and it essentially becomes like a beacon to those. So even though a location may have had a bit of a light haunting before, I think it can build up and manifest even greater. I think there's a flip side of that as well. I think some of these larger locations that are known to be very haunted and what have you can actually kind of start to wane a little bit, because I think that the spirits that are there, like what we would call like a residential spirit, a spirit that actually lives in at the location, I think sometimes they grow tired of all the interaction and here's all these strange people that are coming in all the time, Joe, Bib, Bob, June, whatever, all these different people, and they get tired of being asked the same questions over and over and over again. So I'm just done. So I think there's kind of two sides to it.
Yeah, I just took my kids to the zoo recently, and when you walk in, it's sad. You'll see the. Tell me if you guys experienced this at the zoo. You'll see the animals faced away from the glass where you observe them and ignore everybody walking by. Like they're like completely numb and catatonic, and they just want nothing to do with you, and they don't even want to look at you. And that's what, yeah, that's kind of like what Mike is, saying, and that's what the feeling I get. Like, you go to all these locations, they're pay and play locations, they have someone in there constantly, every day, all day, all night. So why would they jump through your hoops? Why would they be your zoo animal? There's no way.
Well, I mean, keep in mind that a lot of these places, it's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Because the reason people go there is because it's supposed to be haunted. You look at the Whaley House, you look at the Myrtles Plantation, you look at Winchester Mystery House, all these places. I mean, that's, the St. James Hotel in northern New Mexico. I mean, that's the only reason people go there is to be there. So they, when people go to these places, and I talk about that in my book, and I mean, it's no secret, but when people go to the places, they're bringing their expectations, their knowledge of ghosts and folklore to the experience. So I think certainly that part of it, and that's from a sort of folkloric psychological point of view. But to Mike's question, I'm a little more skeptical of that. For example, the idea that I think Mike said that vibrations build up. Well, if that's true, that's a testable. That's what in science we call a falsifiable claim. I mean, either the vibrations, and of course, vibrations are a physical. We can measure vibrations. Either vibrations in a given place build up over time due to the number of people there calling out to spirits, or they don't. My guess is that if we actually did a scientific test, that we would find out they don't. But that's an example of something that in theory you could test this ghost proposition and see if it is in fact true.
I think we should try that sometime. That would be kind of fun.
Good test for me, and I don't think it's always just like building up, but it's just always constantly being sent out. You're sending out a signal. You take a like a radio tower or something like that. It's not always just built up energy that's sitting right there, but it's constantly sending out. So somebody on the other end could eventually trace that back.
Yeah, all I'm saying is that I mean, when you're talking about vibrations are physical medium. I mean, that's what that is. And so this is one of those things that's totally testable through science. And I remember talking to somebody who believed that there was a locally haunted place. It was in New Mexico, about an hour north of here, and it's like, oh yeah, there's ghosts and vibrations everywhere. I said, well, how do we measure this? I mean, we can bring in seismometers, and they're like, well, no, it's sort of like, it's vibrations that science can't detect. Well, that doesn't make sense. That vibrations are by definition something that science can detect. And so I think it's important not to sort of categorize these things in a way that sort of put it in the black box and say, well, this happens, but we can't measure it. Well, why not?
Well, I'm going to kind of speculate here. You have a great point, and I like where Mike's going with that, because that is a theory that in your mind on paper sounds good, but the science isn't there, like you said. So, if you
it's the same thing with stone tape theory, right?
Yeah.
The science doesn't really support stone tape. It's a cool idea, but I'm just not aware of any good science behind it.
The only thing I can think of is there's something. Like, if you look at quantum field theory, there's these multiple fields that vibrate that cause particles, okay? And the Higgs field gives the mass. So there might be some type of field that's causing a vibration, and there might be a particle there doing something like that we have not detected yet. But the skeptical part of me is saying, okay, we got this really cool thing that collides particles, out there at the HLZ. That's why I'm skeptical, is because we have not found that yet. But there's other particles that we theorize that are probably there, but we have not detected yet. So there is a little part of me that's saying, okay, there might be something that could be detectable if we stumble onto it. But as of right now, I have not found any evidence that, EMF causes if any of the paranormal phenomena that we experience in a location. Now, we see weird stuff on meters, but that don't mean anything yet. But, I love talking about that, because science is what we know and what we try to discover. And hopefully there's more out there to discover and that we don't know, so we can keep looking. So I love talking about that part of it. All right, let's go to Facebook and YouTube. Is there any other questions that we can throw in here before we take a break?
Well, there's a question in here, I promise. Donald Hayes asked a question. He said, I hear about near-death experiences all the time, but 8 years ago, I had a heart attack. The doctor said I was clinically dead for 2.5 hours, and they kept me alive by taking turns doing CPR. I didn't have any exercise. I woke up 3 weeks later in the hospital. Don't remember anything about it, just blackness. Do you have any thoughts? I have never talked about this to anyone before, and it has bothered me.
So he's asking, he was pretty much in a coma, and there was no part of him that was conscious, and he has no memory of it. So he wants to know why he didn't have a near-death experience. Am I getting that question right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I chime in on that?
Yes.
Just real quick. I'm so glad that you're still here with us, sir. That's awesome, first and foremost. And to answer the near-death part of it, it may not be that you weren't singled out or that you weren't special enough. I'm not meaning that at all, but not everybody sees ghosts in their lifetime either. So I think it's just a hit or miss kind of thing. And I wouldn't feel that you were excluded by any means, but you're back. So maybe that's your testament, is that you survived.
That's an interesting way to look at it. Mike, do you want to chime in on that?
I guess what I would ask was, okay, in the coma, but did he actually spend a period of time where he was actually dead? Because I think that's where you actually end up with that near-death experience, is when somebody actually flatlines. And when you're in a coma, you're not necessarily flatlined.
So 2.5 hours, I'm gathering that he was in and out of death, like, struggling with that.
Yeah, I'm not a doctor, so I can't really address why that may have been. I've talked to people who have had near-death experiences, and usually it's like they're in the ER, and they're having to be saved and brought back to life. Vanessa Hogo, who I do a show with, has had a couple of different near-death experiences, but they're a little bit different than that, I guess.
Yeah, I'll just jump in. I agree with what Tiffaney said. One of the things that keep in mind is that from the scientific point of view, typically near-death experience is associated with oxygen deprivation in the brain. That's actually one of the main indicators, is people who have been deprived of oxygen with or without actually being close to death. And in fact, many people who report NDEs don't actually report the sort of stereotypical, going down a hallway, meeting people. And so my guess is that in this guy's particular case, that he was not actually, he may or not have been near death, but he wasn't necessarily oxygen deprived, because you can be near death and not have oxygen problems, particularly in a hospital setting. So my guess is that maybe he was getting plenty of oxygen, and because of that, the typical onset of NDEs, which is associated with anoxia, didn't come about.
I do want to add, Sean Gilmore added that the memory aspect, a lot of people just don't remember when you're in unconscious states. You may have had an experience but not remember it, kind of like a dream that you had but then did not remember it. So I just wanted to throw that out there. I thought that was an interesting point too.
Yeah, I don't remember anything.
Yeah, Missy was in a coma for a while, and she's like, nothing happened. I don't remember anything.
I was in a coma for 6 weeks.
Yeah, so there's a lot of stuff that happens that we don't remember, even when we're awake. So memory sucks.
He said, yes, I flatlined. If the doctor would have stopped CPR, my heart was not working on its own. So he would have died if they had stopped CPR.
You were close enough. You should have had, if there is something beyond death, like some kind of transitional thing, you probably should have had something like that, but it's very likely that you don't remember it. If something did happen, there's a high chance of you not remembering it. So that's what my guess would be, if something did happen.
And Andrew Flynn asked, can you see ghosts during the daytime?
You can see ghosts anytime.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the myth that ghosts come out at night only. Let's start off with Ben. I know you got a great answer for this. Why is it in the folklore? Why is it in the popular culture that ghosts can only experience at night? What's up with that?
Well, as Mike and Tiffany just said, I mean, people report ghosts all the time, daytime, nighttime, anytime. things go better with rock. It's just that's where ghosts are. Ghosts are there in photos, there are videos, they're all over the place. And I think that the reason from a folkloric point of view that people associate ghosts with night is, well, there's a couple reasons. One is that of course, the darkness, the notion of both actual physical darkness and the emotional darkness of going out in the nighttime, and you don't know what's out there. It's the same reason why people get creeped out about swimming at night. People, unless it's a lit swimming pool, a lot of people won't, even though it's like there's nothing in the pool. But they're like, no, I don't. People get creeped out in the darkness, right? And so part of it is that, but it is interesting that from my research, that it's true that people do tend to report ghosts more at night than during the daytime. That doesn't mean they're not seen all the time, but there's a higher prevalence of that. And there's a couple reasons for that. One is that nighttime is when people are relaxed. They're not focused on their job. They're not at the supermarket. They're not in traffic. And, most people don't report ghosts in their everyday lives in terms of, I was at the supermarket, I was driving. Usually when people report ghosts, it's in their hallways at night. It's maybe late at night, maybe as they're going to sleep. And so that's when they're home. They're not reporting ghosts at Wegmans and Target and Walmart. They're reporting ghosts when maybe they've had a beer or two, maybe they're just relaxing with friends. And so there's a psychological reason why people are more likely to experience things that they may put a label on as a ghost.
Yeah, good point. Tiffany?
I have to say, the old saying, the witching hour. And a lot of it comes to when, as Benjamin said, when you're at night, you don't have the ability to think logically as you would throughout the day. Your mind is already kind of on shutdown mode. You're wore down from the day. So you hear a noise in the hallway, you're automatically... well, you tend to be more at least creeped out, where if you heard it in the daytime, you'd think, oh, is my cat walking down the hall, or any number of things. But something about the nighttime tends to make the average noise amplified and more spooky.
And that's true. Let me just add to that. And that's true whether or not ghosts exist. So either way, it's a psychological thing and it's a ghost thing. It doesn't matter. The same explanation goes for both ways, because you're more open to, interpretations.
Mm-hmm. I like it. Mike?
It's creepier. Dark things come out at dark times. That's why.
From a storyteller point of view, I would love to hear this.
Absolutely. You think of all the different stories from Poe and what have you. It sets that ambiance. As far as like reporting of ghosts and what have you, they do come about any time of day. And in fact, I would contend that they're all or mostly at night, because I talk to a lot of people who work at historic locations, museums, the different docents and tour guides and what have you. They're working during the day, and they report those sightings all the time during the day. Sure, and maybe if they're closing up at night, they might see something too. And there's also, when we investigate the paranormal, we don't have to investigate at night. The shows kind of said, okay, we have to do it at night. That's they set that standard to a degree, because people are investigating the paranormal long before that as well. But and there's a couple benefits actually to doing that at night as to opposed during the day. As far as like Tiffany was saying, that things seem to be a little bit louder when a noise is made at night. It's because the noise pollution from around the area is greatly reduced, because people aren't driving around. Some people have already gone to bed, so all that noise pollution is down. So you can actually hear things better at night. The shadow play that you might get through the window from, let's say if it's a sunny day, but there's clouds going, back and forth, that might be, crossing in front of the sun. You'd have that play in and out of the windows, and you don't have that at night. Of course, you might have some headlights from streetcars to contend with, and so there's a little bit of that. But there's some different aspects to investigate at night that fare better than trying to investigate during the day. But we'll investigate any time. It really doesn't matter, because you can you can witness a ghost or spirit or what have you at any time.
Can I chime in on that too, real quick? I do all of my readings predominantly during the day, so I would be encountering the deceased loved ones or friends during the day. I don't do my readings at night because, one, that's creepy, and two, it's just, but so I encounter them during the day.
Don't knock it until you try it.
I would say I would actually take exactly the opposite tack of Mike for exactly the same reasons that he described. Ironically, we're all three of us are basically saying the same thing, that at night you're more likely to overinterpret, either realistically or not realistically. This is a known fact. I'm not making that, but we're more likely to interpret weird sounds, whatever else is being spooky. And to my mind, that's all the more reason not to investigate at night. Because if your goal is to separate out what's really a ghost or what's not a ghost, what's a misperception, what's a misunderstanding, then what you want to do is you want to minimize that, right? You want to decrease the false positives. You don't want to increase it by choosing to do it at a time when they're tired, they're more likely to misunderstand things, misperceive things. So I would actually do the opposite of what Mike's suggesting for the same reasons that he's
actually. What I suggested was that I'll investigate any time of day. I've done many daytime investigations, done many nighttime investigations as well. To me, it does not matter.
No, I just thought that I heard you saying that you prefer to do it.
It's as far as noise pollution. Noise pollution's down, so you don't get all the streetcar noises, and people mowing lawns and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
There's pros and cons. I definitely think that you should do it if you're investigating a claim. You should do it when they're experiencing it. You should, if they're only experiencing it at night, you definitely want to go there in the day to see if it happens. If you're a real investigator, you just don't do it at night.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point, because you'll see on these shows where it's like, the tour guide or the docent at the historic location, saw something or experienced something at 2 p.m, and these guys on TV are doing it at 2 a.m.
Absolutely. No, let me just chime in on exactly what Mike just said. Is that's exactly right. Is that over and over I see people who are investigating under circumstances that are totally different than when people saw the ghost. It's like, it was at midnight and I saw a ghost. Oh, okay, let me show up 2 weeks later at noontime. That's not the conditions under which the ghost was found. And the other aspect to it, and this is one of the things that I find most problematic with most ghost hunters, is that they fail to recognize the amount of data you need to establish a baseline, right? So if you're going to go in order to know what's abnormal, then you need to know what's normal. In order to know what's supernatural, you need to know what's natural for a given location, right? You're talking the sounds, the smells, the EMS, whatever it is you want to measure. And oftentimes, the ghost hunters, at least the ones on TV, and many amateur ones that I've seen as well, they'll go to a location like, oh, we're going to go there, we're going to spend, the witching hour will be there at 9, well, then we'll wrap up in the next morning. And it's like they only went there once or twice. But in order to actually get a valid baseline from a statistical, scientific point of view, you have to take multiple samplings. You can't just go there at 6 p.m. and 2 a.m. You need to go there repeatedly. You have to know what the temperature in the house normally is at 7 a.m. and at midnight and these different times. And a lot of ghost hunters, they don't want to put in that time. They don't want to put in the effort that it takes to build a database of statistically valid measurements. Because it's more fun just to walk around at midnight and turn off the lights and scare themselves and then go home and listen to EVPs, instead of taking the time and effort to actually establish a valid database so they can compare those measurements later on.
I'll agree with that. I will actually agree with that, because it's actually something we're talking tomorrow night on our show Inside the Upside Down in relation to Mineral Springs Hotel, where you're right. A lot of people just go in there once, maybe twice, and they're just collecting data. We got an EVP. We caught something on video here, and they throw it up on YouTube or on what we captured, and that's random data. You need to collect all that data, but then develop information out of it and start to create that story rather than just all this randomness. And so one of the things that be showing tomorrow night is how over a couple of years, going back to this location again and again and again, how we have all these different data points, and we brought that together, and we've actually created real information out of different experiences, different EVPs, things that we've seen, all this in this one particular location. So, yes, I agree with you on that.
I mean, you have to determine, are you there for the boo factor? Are you there to help the spirits? Are you there for scientific reasons? And I, to kind of go off the zoo that we had mentioned earlier, how rude of us to go in and demanding them to just show up and be when they already are, you know? And so I think if we're respectful and it shouldn't matter daytime or nighttime, whether we're there. If they're there, then they're there, you know?
Absolutely.
That makes sense?
I'm going to take a break. I'm going to let the viewers take a break if they need to, let you guys take a break. We're going to be back in about 6.5 minutes. So far, the conversation is going just as I planned it to go. I love everything that, the viewers are asking and what the panel is saying, and it's just freaking awesome. We're going to show some video promotions. We'll see you back in about 6 minutes, folks, so stay tuned.
Are we muted?
What was that?
I don't know. I feel like I can't breathe in this room.
Generally, Justin, when you guys investigate, do you just take long pauses, wait to see if you hear things, observe everything that's going on?
It depends on the location and our experience with the location. So in this case, at Waverly Hills, since we've been here before, we've heard a lot of stories, done a lot of research, and investigated. We typically like to listen a lot because we hear the coughing, we heard it last time, so we can hear it again.
This room over here. What the fuck, dude?
Whoa.
That's weird.
You didn't do anything, right?
No, it just turns Justin too close.
No.
He opened that door and it went off.
Yeah, exactly.
Did you just run out of there?
And welcome back to the Supernatural Symposium. We got we're an hour in, and so far we're starting to feel a momentum. We're starting to dig in, I feel. So, if you have any more questions, keep them coming. If we have any new viewers that's popped in, please, by all means, let us know. Comment, we'll shout you out, and we will try our best to get to your question and have everybody on the panel answer them for you. So, all right, guys, we were talking previously about, someone had asked, do ghosts only come out at night, or why do ghosts only come out at night, something like that. And we started leading into, you shouldn't only just investigate at night. No, if things do actually happen, they happen all the time. And we kind of talked about the reasons why people perceive the nighttime as more active. And that is always an interesting question because, Ben talked about, you're relaxing, things are quieter. Mike had mentioned it too. You will see things out of the corner of your eye more. You will, that little bang down the hallway will freak you out more at night than it will during the day, like Tiffany said. So there is definitely a psychological aspect to why people are more prone to believing and perceiving and experiencing those things at night. But back to the haunting stuff. I want to know what the panel thinks. What causes hauntings from your point of view? What makes a place haunted? If it's more than one thing, you can kind of elaborate on the different things you think causes them. We'll go with you, Tiffany, first. What do you think causes a haunting? What are some of the different things that can cause a haunting?
So far from my journey, what I've encountered that can cause a haunting are people and emotion. We're tied. Any point in time during this lifetime, we come in contact with people we love, people we hate, and the emotions that are attached to those. So I feel like both of those things combined make a haunting. If you are strongly attached to your home and life and you built it from the ground and you raised your family there, then that could create a haunting. If you were murdered by somebody you cared about, that could create a haunting. So people and emotion.
Interesting. Mike, do you have anything to add to that? Any different takes?
Sorry, in my head I was being a little facetious, and I was about to say something. I should say something about vibration or stone tape theory and see what Ben has to say.
Go for it. I'm right here. I got an hour.
But yeah, I mean, kind of piggybacking on what Tiffany said, those sorts of attachments to locations or even people. Like an example that you could classify as a haunting, I would rather say it was more of like a visitation, is when my grandfather passed away several years ago, he seemed to hang around and visit many of us within the family, most particularly, of course, my grandmother, who saw him numerous times and would have interactions with him, but so did I and others in the family. And then after she passed, they went somewhere else and have never heard from them since. So it you could say that my grandfather was kind of haunting some different, locations, but it was more of an attachment to people and those interpersonal connections rather than a specific location.
Yeah, those are the things that I think that are more possible, more feasible. They make more sense to me. Like, you surviving death and then hanging out in a place for eternity or for X amount of time doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. But energy, like what we would call residual or psychokinetic, whatever you want to say, that lingering around makes more sense to me. And it seems like, even though that it might not be the actual person surviving beyond death, I see how it could still interact with you intelligently, like it's an aspect or a copy or an echo of what once was or what used to be them. Do you have anything else to say about that idea or theory, Mike?
I mean, that's usually my primary example, which is interesting because I've done all these investigations, all this research, what have you, for so many years, and a primary example that I use is something personal like that. So it's like throw everything else out, and this is my experience. But I think it can happen for locations too, or maybe an object. Like just another example. A friend of mine that I used to work with back in Maryland, when her father passed away, he was a big time ham radio hobbyist, and so he had all the radio equipment set up in his basement. And so when she and her sister were cleaning out the house, doing things to get it ready, that radio would always kick on and start turning. The dials would start turning and doing all these different things, and so they'd always shout down to the basement, "Hey, Dad, knock it off!" So they presumed it was the father coming back and playing with the radio because that was his favorite thing to do. So it was that familiarity with something here in the physical plane.
Right. And yeah, that's totally cool. Hopefully we can find something at some point to prove if that's actually what's happening, because dealing with death and coping with it is, I think, responsible to a lot of the things that we perceive as ghosts and hauntings. So we may go in more depth about that. Ben, what say you? What causes hauntings from a skeptic point of view?
A good question. I would sort of take it from a psychological, experiential, and sort of folkloric point of view. Again, going back to my idea of ghosts as being a label for an experience that somebody can't explain. So I would say that what causes, and maybe I'm being too literal. I've been accused of being too literal and pedantic. So bear with me if I am. But at the risk of that, I would say that really what causes a haunting are expectations and assumptions and interpretations. And I don't mean that in a good or bad way. It's just that's what it is. It's taking something that's weird, you can't explain. You saw something that vanished, or your keys moved, or you felt something weird come over you, or whatever the experience is. And either a friend or a parent or a TV show or somebody coming to you and saying, "Oh, that's a ghost. You experienced a ghost." You're like, "Wow, okay, I didn't know that." Okay, so it's basically, again, it's a psychological process by which you're being given a template or a script or a label to put on that. And so and I find it useful to think of a ghost experience in that way, because that way you can apply it to urban legends. You can apply it to weird things that people see, if they're looking for ghosts in a haunted place, things like that. And I would avoid labeling a haunting or a ghost experience as something that is this, for example, energy. Because, a lot of times the word energy gets used around a lot, right? Because energy has a bunch of different uses, right? I mean, we think of like, oh, I woke up and I don't have much energy. But in scientific terms, energy can be measured, right? Energy is heat. Energy is that there's an actual, it's not fuzzy in scientific terms. In physics terms, we know what energy is. And so if people are talking about ghosts being literally energy, that is physical energy, then that's fine. That's where you get the idea of cold spots and warm spots and this and that. But keep in mind, at that point, then it's empirical. At that point, you can we can test whether a allegedly haunted location is full of energy or it's not. That is not unknowable. We can do scientific tests. And so oftentimes the problem is that when you define ghost as being energy or being this or being that, then you're sort of boxing yourself into what is essentially a testable empirical claim. And unfortunately, a lot of times there is no follow-up for that actual claim.
Right. Not yet. And I think for good reason, because if ghosts were thermal, you would think that they would be easily detectable. There's so much cheap, readily available equipment to detect that. Now, if it's electrical, if it has charge, the EMF meters would pick that stuff up. And just let's face it, there is no, good data out there that says that, when there's a ghost present, a meter goes off. And, most of us ghost hunters out there, we're not trained. We're not scientists. The expectation that we'll figure out anything as mysterious as what if that's a ghost or not, and if it, can be correlated with anything like a magnetic field is probably beyond 99.9% of the know-how and capability of the people out there doing the research. And I'm growing more and more weary that we even can do anything, for any good for the field when it comes to that, but I'm going to keep an open mind thus far. Where's this leading us? So if you, Ben, let me ask you this. If you think that there's no scientific hardcore proof out there yet, do you honestly think that there's any light of the tunnel? Do you think we'll ever solve this mystery, or do you think that it's just a dog chasing its tail?
Well, I'm not optimistic, unfortunately. I am a skeptic, and I make no bones about it, but I'm an open-minded skeptic. And I've spent well over 15, 18 years now doing ghost investigations. And it's not because I think ghosts are stupid or ghosts are silly or people who seek ghosts or talk to ghosts are crazy. Not at all. I think ghosts are cool. That's why we're all talking about this. But my goal with my research in my book, Investigating Ghosts and other books, is to try and improve the quality of the research in ghost investigations. And so that's why I'm putting all this time and effort into it. It's not because I like wasting my time. It's because if ghosts are real, then whatever we're doing, it's not working. If ghosts are real and your goal is to prove them, to scientifically prove it, then I think we can probably all admit that has not worked out so far. Because we've all talked to ghost hunters, say, oh, it's all been proven, and then you sort of have to whittle them down to the evidence. But at the end of the day, the simple fact is that the ghosts have not been proven to exist. I think we can all agree on that. And then the question is why? Either it's because the techniques that we're using, the ghost hunting techniques, the stuff you see on TV and the EMFs and all, either that's not working because the ghosts don't exist, or because the methods need to be improved. And so my goal in writing Investigating Ghosts, and my goal in being a skeptical investigator, is not to debunk or disprove or be a wet blanket. It's to say, hey guys, this is cool, this is interesting, let's up our games. Let me tell you a quick story. I was on a TV show called Mystery Quest, and it was a show called the Real Amityville Horror. And I was out there. It was in Carson, California. I was out there with Josh. It wasn't Joshua Warren, it was one of the guys. And you can find it on YouTube. It's there. But it was interesting. So we're at Haunted Wolf Manor in Carson, California, and I was there. And I saw these guys, these ghost hunters, bringing all the gear. Right, they show up in this huge van, and they're bringing cartloads and cartloads and cartloads of all these cameras and all this equipment. And, they're sitting up and all this sorts of stuff. And then the next day, we were actually going back to the hotel. We finished shooting. We're wrapping up. We're going back. And I talked to the guy. I said, and it was me and the producer, and him. We were just driving back to the hotel. It was 2 a.m. It was off camera. And I just said, I'm just curious, why do you think that we still don't have good evidence for ghosts? And he's like, well, I think it's because science can't prove ghosts, that we can't detect them. I said, well, hold on here. Yesterday, you and your crew spent 45 minutes unloading these vans with all these gadgets, and oh my God, there's EMF cameras and this and that. They had $40,000 worth of gear that they're bringing out to the location. I'm like, if you really think that none of this will find ghosts, then why do you have it? I mean, seriously. I wasn't trying. It wasn't like a gotcha moment. I'm just like, I don't understand. I'm asking you honestly and sincerely why you think that we still don't have good evidence for ghosts, and your answer is because scientific equipment can't detect them. Well, what the hell are you doing with all this scientific equipment then if you don't think it'll work? And it was weird. It's like nobody ever asked him that. He's like, well, and the producer's like, ooh. But it was I think there was something in that exchange that was sort of telling, I think, for all three of us.
Yeah. I think that a lot of people don't think things through, and they're not used to being questioned when they're out doing those things. I question myself all the time, and I drive myself crazy. It's like I have Ben Radford in my head every day. Imagine that.
We can arrange that.
Well, you're on my friends list now, so come at me, bro. All right, Tiffany, from a psychic point of view, do you think science will ever find validation for the psychic phenomena? Do you think they're close? Do you think it's not happening? What do you think about that?
Honestly, and this might make me sound bad, but I don't need to prove the existence of spirits because I know they exist. So whether other people believe it or not, I don't need to prove to them.
Is there any value?
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does. But is there any value in trying to find any proof or validation for those that may not know?
I think there is, simply for the fact that death is the great enigma. People are terrified of it. They're either afraid of leaving nothing behind or going into an abyss or ending up in a box or on a mantle. So I think once people get past the fear of death, then the validity of ghosts may come shortly thereafter, or maybe they won't need to be validated at all.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Now, Justin.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, can I say quick something real quick?
Yes.
Now, I think with each person, the validation will be different. Like something you've seen that you've actually felt or seen or, heard or something would be a complete 100% validation for somebody else. And then, the next person will be like, yeah, you're full of shit. You know what I'm saying? So I think everybody has a, what, I don't know. Did that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. The question I'm asking is an objective truth. What you're talking about is an inner truth, something that's truth to them, and it means a validation to them, but it's subjective. It's not,
right.
I'm asking about an objective truth, something that science can validate, something that you can prove whether you believe it or not.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Sorry.
That's okay. Mike, same question.
Yeah, it's extremely hard to try to prove the paranormal and that ghosts exist. I mean, as far as like trying to apply the scientific method and all that, you don't have a control object. Mm-hmm. You're dealing with something that you can't see, you usually can't feel, or you can't quantify it. So how do you even build a control around that? So it makes it very difficult. It's a good point about all the equipment. People go out there, running around with EMF detectors and what have you. We did a whole episode on Inside the Upside Down, slamming the ghost box. I don't use them. I don't like them. And I don't think ghosts talk in radio, in order for that methodology to be able to work. So, yeah, there you go. Ben agrees with me on something. So, I keep my arsenal of equipment pretty light. I only go into, a few basic things. And Justin, me, more of what I'm about is telling the story of what's going on with these locations. I mean, we're not out there to try to prove a haunting. If we're doing a residential, then we're going to try to, see just what's going on to begin with. And if we can eliminate, the plumbing, the electrical, and all that stuff, okay, maybe it's something different. We'll see what's going on. But again, it is, very difficult. And when we, post our quote unquote evidence, for lack of a better term, or experiences, or, clips, or whatever you want to call them, it's like, okay, this is our interpretation of what it is we captured, or we may not even know, but we'll leave it up to the audience to determine, what we got, if we're doing like a video on it. So, it's difficult. And, more of what we're trying to do is tell the story of these locations, and, these ghost stories and the hauntings that are supposed to go on there are all part of the fabric of that location. So, like Mineral Springs that we're going to be touching on tomorrow night. We've, like I was saying earlier, we've kind of built up all this data over years of investigating there, and so we've started to build a story with these different things that we've captured that work into that fabric of that location. So, yeah,
awesome.
It's
well said, Mike. Well said.
Yeah, a lot of people generally, what I see them do is trying to go through their own channels, and they're trying to establish things on their own terms, not like someone's, the scientist terms or stuff like that. And that's really all you can do. You can't control the environment at the standards that are called or demanded by science, no matter what you do. I mean, you can make a lab and try to, but let's face it, we don't have the money, we don't have the time, it's not feasible. So yeah, I just was kind of interested in knowing what you guys thought about that. Even outside what you observe in the community, do you think we're anywhere close, or are we miles away? So I think we all pretty much agree on that. Any questions?
Well, let me just add one other quick thing, which is that, if someone comes to me and says that they believe in ghosts, my answer is cool. That's great. I mean, that doesn't bother me at all. I'm not offended by that. I know lots of people believe in ghosts, and people have seen ghosts. And so, as an investigator, my job is not to debunk or disprove or tell them they're wrong. My job is to figure out what the hell is going on. If there really is a ghost there, then that's cool. That's great. I want to be there. Right? That's the same with all of us, right? So even though I'm approaching it from more science-based, empirical, skeptical point of view, that doesn't mean that I'm trying to debunk or disprove. I'm trying to figure out what's going on. I mean, I would love to be the first person to actually prove that ghosts exist. I mean, believe me, that would be the ultimate thing. So,
for sure.
It's for my mind, it's all well and good if you're just going to say, well, I believe it. Then that's great. That's wonderful for you. That's not an issue. At the point in which I get involved in a case is when someone says, I believe the ghost here and I can prove it. When they say, and I can prove it, or, and here's the evidence, and X, Y, and Z, that's when I'm like, okay, let's check this out. That's where I get into it. But if someone just, something like 45% of people believe in ghosts. It's very common. That's perfectly fine. That's wonderful. But again, it's when the science is when someone says, and I can prove it, or, and here's good evidence, that's when my skeptical antenna goes up.
I like that you're an open-minded skeptic. You often encounter people who are fully immersed 100% in one way and fully immersed 100% in the other way. And you are walking that middle ground very gracefully, might I add. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and it's like I wouldn't waste my time. Look, if I were convinced that ghosts didn't exist, I wouldn't have wasted the last 15 years of my life. I wouldn't have bothered writing my book, which is available on Amazon, by the way. It's like, no, but seriously, I mean, I've spent a lot of my own time and effort. I've traveled all across. I've been dozens and dozens of haunted locations, interviewing people, taking photographs, doing them. If I thought all this was bullshit, I wouldn't waste my time. I'm trying to figure out what's going on, and if the answer is that there's ghosts, then that's great. If the answer is there's not ghosts, then I still want to figure out, well, what the hell's going on? Why do people think there's ghosts? So it's fascinating to me either way.
Yeah, it goes back to what you were saying before about if it's all in people's heads, that's equally fascinating.
Mass hysteria.
I'm not sure. A lot of times it is. Let's go to the peanut gallery. Let's see if there's any other questions that we got going on Facebook and YouTube?
I have 4.
Oh my gosh, let's get to them.
Okay. I'm a cleaner wants to know, when someone passes out, do they dream?
What are they passing out from?
Yeah, that would be my first question.
Anesthesia?
How much have they had
No.
to drink?
Anesthesia, you don't dream. I know that much.
A drunken night?
Okay, let's move on to the next question.
John Ward asked, how do you explain people being grabbed, scratched, etc.?
There we go. Let's go with Mike.
Yeah, good question. All the years that I've been doing this, I've never been grabbed or scratched, I've been grabbed, but never scratched. But I've seen a number of people who, will say, hey, this happened. I've also seen it before where, somebody, there's doing one of these, I have a habit of that. And then all of a sudden, oh, hey, I got this on my neck. But the thing that gets me about the scratching is people suddenly, they get a scratch on their arm and that they have the 3 welts or whatever. And it's like, oh my God, it must be demonic. And well, no, I don't think it's demonic. But they always say, 3, insulting the Trinity and that sort of thing. If it is something that's paranormal, if it is a spirit that's reaching out to you and touching you, we really don't know the intent. And I understand that, well, from our physical plane of existence, we would see somebody scratching you as, probably something nefarious, trying to injure you, what have you. But it also happens on the physical plane where sometimes it's an accident where, somebody might just be trying to touch you or whatever, and they hit you the wrong way, or maybe they're tripping over something and they just happen, whatever it is. There's things like that happen. And again, we don't know how it is that it works on that other side. So maybe they are just trying to kind of poke you. Hey, I'm trying to get your attention, and they don't understand how their Ben's going to hate this word, energy, but how their, whatever it is, their essence, whatever the heck you want to call it, how they work on that other side, how they interact with the physical plane. And maybe them just trying to poke you actually turns it into this scratch. We don't know. It's all theories at this point.
Indeed. Let's go to Tiffaney. Have anything to add?
I actually have one story for this. I've never been scratched or pushed or anything, and this has only ever happened one time. It was at a location near us in Fairfield. We had investigated this location twice. So this was the second time we were there, and I had been there all day. From setup to tear down, in and out of the house, never any problem, never felt off, no issues. Well, my last tour of the house for the evening, I had just come off break and I was going up the back stairs, and all of a sudden, the only way I can describe it is almost like the atmosphere shifted. Now, mind you, I was outside going up the stairwell because this house had an outdoor stairwell, and I just felt like the windows were looking at me. It was really uncomfortable, and I couldn't figure out why all of a sudden I really felt kind of threatened, almost like a presence was threatening me, but there was nothing around. And so I just brushed it off like, it must just be me, I'm tired or what have you. So I went in the house, and there was about 8 people at the time. In the upstairs parlor, there's a gentleman using dowsing rods. We had a camera crew there at the time because we were filming a special for a news channel, and then there was people in the back of the house with millimeters and different things. Well, I walked in, and I was just standing in the corner because I didn't want to be on camera or doing anything like that. My hair wasn't done, but all of a sudden I just felt this female presence, and I had encountered her earlier in the day and everything was fine. But she did not like me being in the room with him using the dowsing rods. And what I kept getting from her was that she was recognizing him, like she thought that he was somebody that she knew from her own lifetime, which, I mean, if you believe in reincarnation, sure, I guess. But there was no reason for her to behave that way. She just became very possessive of the guy using the dowsing rods. And so I'm standing off in the corner, and she kept, like, the impression I got was I needed to leave the room. I needed to leave the room. But in my mind, I'm thinking, well, why should I leave the room? Like, I was trying to piece it together. Well, all of a sudden, I felt what felt like a strand of pearl necklaces wrapped around my throat, and it caught me by surprise so hard and quick, I actually gasped. And the cameraman for the camera crew panned over to me, and somebody actually caught me. And I've never had that encounter ever, knock on wood. It was the one and only time. And my husband was in the room like a flash. We got me outside, and as we were going back outside, I felt her on me the whole way. Like, I told you to leave, I told you to leave, So we get outside, and I'm very bad at grounding. I don't ground. I know it's a thing you're supposed to do. I just don't do it. But my husband's like, he threw my arms around this tree in the front yard, and he goes, you need to get the energy off you. I look up, and that woman is glowering at me from the upstairs window. And that's the one and only time I ever had that encounter. And to me, it wasn't that she was malicious or trying to cause me harm. It was basically, I was in her space. I didn't listen to her requests to leave because I didn't understand it. And so then she was just like, you know what? Now you're going to go.
Interesting. Quick question. Was it the Elijah Morgan mansion?
Yes.
Okay, I thought so. Dan.
I'll give you one quick anecdote that I investigated a couple years back. This was back in Buffalo, New York, where I lived for a while. I investigated a case in which the guy, there were a variety of claims, including a demonic face and in a photograph and things like that. But one of the strangest was that the guy said that he was being kicked by a ghost, like actually physically assaulted by a ghost. And that was the first time. I'd been doing investigations for a couple of years at this point, but that was the first time I was actually face to face with someone who's saying it's not just a shadow figure in the hallway. It's like I'm actually being physically attacked by a ghost. And it took me a while to figure out what it was. And so I'll give you the outlines. He was a big, heavy set guy. He worked in a Ford plant. And what he said was happening was that at night, as he was going to sleep, he would feel a ghost kick him, usually on the leg, and he would wake him up and he'd freak out because he believed at the time that there was a demonic spirit in the house, and that's why they called me there to come and look. I'll give you the solution. The solution was that he actually had restless leg syndrome, and what was happening was he was a big guy, as I mentioned, and he had sleep apnea. Well, one of the symptoms of sleep apnea is restless leg syndrome, which is better known now as RLS because it's now being advertised and you can find medications on TV. But this was about 10, 15 years ago before it was really widely discussed. And what was happening was that as he would drift off to sleep, his leg would twitch and it would wake him up, and he interpreted that as being a ghost kicking him. And his wife, he was actually sleeping separate from his wife. So he was on a light cot. It wasn't just a big bed. It was like a light cot in a separate room because of the sleep apnea and because they were all scared. And so that really was interesting to me because, again, to him, it was crystal clear, like, oh my God, I'm being kicked by a ghost. But it turned out that there actually was a logical explanation for it. And he agreed with me. This wasn't just me saying, oh, no. He's like, yeah, you're actually right. It always happened at the same time, just as he was going off to sleep, just as his body was relaxing, his leg twitched and he wakes up and he's freaking out. So, I know for a fact that in some of the cases, and Mike talked about this before, you can have people who there's unnoticed scratches. Diabetics, for example, people have problems with their feet. I've seen people who have been bleeding and they oh my God, I didn't realize bleeding. So we can all get not unexplained, but unexplained scratches and bumps and knocks that are perfectly ordinary that we just don't happen to notice. But again, within the context of a claim or a haunting or a belief in a ghost or demonic infestation, that suddenly becomes evidence.
Right. So it's not always ghosts, says Ben.
It's not always ghosts. That's the TLDR. Not always ghosts.
Right. Before we address some of the other Facebook questions, let me check with YouTube. Is there any questions on YouTube we need to ask?
Yes, I have a couple. And actually, Anna, Sally, Caesar, and Christy has joined as well. But Tim had a question. Tim Schoen from the first half, and I'll just ask that one. What are your thoughts on residual hauntings? What causes these, and what are the significance of them?
Mike, go ahead and take this one first.
Good question, because everything, I mean, it's all theoretical. So sure, there's, Ben's going to love it. There is the idea of stone tape theory, whether you believe in it or not. But this idea that somehow the energy from that, some tragic event or what have you is somehow trapped in the metal or the stone or whatever at the location. There's something, we don't know what it is, triggers it, and it's a playback, and it, kind of like your tape recorder, and it plays that back. It's an interesting theory. Nobody's been able to prove it. But it does kind of act like that, like it is something that's playing back, like you're watching a little bit of a movie play out. People report seeing apparitions walk into walls, and you discover later on that there used to be a door there and things like that. So it's not intelligent, at least as far as we know. It just seems to be like some sort of playback of something that happened there at one point in time. But as far as exactly what it is and why it happens, to be honest, we don't honestly know.
All right, that's awesome. Tiffany, do you have anything to add? Different angle?
It's almost like spectral DVR. Can you imagine? But my only thing with that is, not to sound cliche, but my husband and I have gone to Gettysburg a couple times, and with the stone tap theory, definitely on Little Round Top, and in the Bloody Angle, there is vibrations there that if you're attuned to it, you can pick up on them. And whether those are active spirits because they're intermingled, or whether it's just a repeat because, and don't kill me, Ben, but blood shed is energy release. So if it all went into the ground, then there has to be something there as well.
Yes. Ben, I'm sure you have a skeptical angle on residual haunting. I mean, do you ever think about it?
Yeah, honestly, I think it's best understood in terms of folklore, frankly, in terms of stories and narratives, right? Because, the idea of a recurring haunting, something that happens, for example, you have the stories where the widow's walk, right? You have a woman and her husband is out to sea, and she's seen, every full moon walking on a particular cliff or something, a part of it. That's all. It's a repeating story. It's a repeating what in folklore we call a motif. And it's classic legend making. That is the definition of folklore and legend making. Now, that doesn't mean that it's not true. It doesn't mean that it can't be true. What it means is that it's best understood through the prism of, hey, this is a story. This is a legend. This is what's going on. So that's, I think, my answer would be that particularly something like stone tape theory and residual hauntings are classic legends and folklore.
Right. Yeah. They've been around since people could tell stories, I would imagine. And started experiencing things that they didn't have, ready answers for. So it's been around, and you definitely need to consider that possibility. Was there another good question on YouTube, or do we need to go check with Facebook again?
I'm trying to find my notes. I'm sorry. Christy actually asked, is there a difference from them not talking into a ghost box and using a recorder? What she's getting at is, why would it be the difference of getting an EVP through a recorder and not trust a radio?
Okay. Mike, do you want to start off with this one?
Yeah. I'm gonna take insight on as far as the ghost box. Ghosts don't talk in radio. They just don't. If you understand the way a radio receiver works, in order for that receiver to be able to pick up that voice, the transmission of it would have to be in a radio signal for that receiver to pick it up. So I don't believe it happens. The other idea is that the spirits would be manipulating somehow the words that are coming through on the radio. Well, it's cycling 13 times per second, and unless they can see into the future to know what the heck is going to come next to be able to piece it together, it just doesn't work. So I chalk up ghost boxes as entertainment only. I think a lot of people want that quick interaction off of a ghost box like that to believe like they're having a real-time conversation. And I just don't believe it works like that. So yeah, I stick by my audio recorder. And sometimes you do appear to get voices that are answering your questions, and and some of those voices are kind of like, well, and I leave it to interpretation for a lot of other people, but that has been a heck of a lot more reliable for me than trying to play around with something like a ghost box.
Awesome. Tiffaney, what do you think the difference between a ghost box response and an EVP is?
I don't use either, so I wouldn't be the best person. I've been with people who have used one or the other. To me, I prefer the old-fashioned voice recorder. I mean, you're not reaching for something that isn't there. I mean, you are, but you aren't. You're not, scanning radio waves and expecting miracles to happen. You're just posing a question that's out there and hoping for an answer when it comes to a voice recorder. So that's just my experience.
Awesome.
Can I capture out there? That's a third idea to use.
Yes.
Water.
Like ITC or
like a fountain. It's interesting. So I'll just give an example real quick. So our friend Lee Ehrlich, who does a lot of paranormal investigations underwater. He's a world-class scuba diver, does a lot of deep sea wreckage, salvage and stuff like that. And he's actually seen and witnessed paranormal activity down in these wrecks. But one of the things that he taught us how to use was how to use water. And so we're at Mineral Springs, and there's a big fountain that's there. And he's like, just listen, and you can actually, between like the lup, lup, lup of it, and it's really interesting, you can actually hear the voices. And so we have a video called Voices of Mineral Springs where we're audibly with it's like the disembodied voice where you're hearing the voice come across. And sure, you can also say it's an EVP too, because there it is on the video, you can hear it, but we're having a conversation back and forth with the voices that we're hearing off the water. It was really interesting.
Yeah, I've definitely seen him. I'm pretty sure it was on your show and other shows. That's definitely interesting. Ben, differences?
Yeah, I'm going to have to agree with Mike on this one. There's lots of people who've done lots of stuff into, Frank's boxes and things like that. Kenny Biddle has done some great stuff on that. I met Christopher Moon and saw his Frank's box and talked to him. I was at pains to understand what the hell he was saying, because none of it really made sense to me. I mean, I understood what he was saying, but in terms of like how that would actually work and how that would be distinguished from just frankly bullshit was not clear to me at all. So, it's a neat idea. And of course it goes back to, we're talking Rorschach. I mean, it's literally a projective test, right? We see faces in clouds. We see coffee stains. We look for signs in nature. We cast runes. We look at tea leaves. I mean, it's the same principle. We're looking for meaning in ambiguous stimuli and sounds and things like that. And it's a well-known phenomenon. I mean, we all do it. It's well understood. So it's just, it's important to understand that it's not this mysterious unknown thing. We know the processes behind it. And in theory, we should actually be able to get really good information and evidence from these sorts of devices. And yet, so far, it's been a big goose egg.
Dare I say pareidolia?
Dare you say, sir?
Yeah, it's a problem. And I think that the difference I would say is the spirit box is more prone two false positives like pareidolia and just interpreting something that's radio as a spirit voice. So the difference would be, the recorder, you got much more control. Everything's quiet. You don't hear a voice when you're recording, but when you play it back, you do. So not only is it more legitimate, dare I say, but you're actually getting something out of thin air versus, some type of manipulation that you can't prove. So there's my difference.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, it's the same process. You're still listening, trying to make meaning out of. Right. I mean, whether it's all. I mean, you're right. I mean, I would agree with you that, for example, something like Frank's box or one of the other devices, the likelihood of you getting a false positive that is a message that actually isn't real is probably far higher. But again, we see the same problem with EVP research. I mean, it's anytime when you're combing through and speeding up and slowing down and doing gain and all sorts of manipulation, if you're looking for some message, the human brain is very good at finding messages even when they're not there.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. We have 3 minutes left. So if we did not get to your question, I am sorry. These guys are going to plug their stuff. They're going to tell you how you can get a hold of them. You can ask them directly, and I'm sure they would be delighted to give you an answer. They've spent a lot of time, talking to folks and answering their questions and interacting and engaging the community. So hopefully you do that. Let's do some plugs. Ben, since I have you on screen right now, why don't you plug everything that you want to plug, tell how they can follow your work, buy your book. Yes.
Yes. This is my most recent book. It actually won an award, New Mexico Arizona Book Award. This was published earlier this year, titled Investigating Ghosts, The Scientific Search for Spirits. It's 320 pages, under $20, not a bad deal. And I've written 8 or 9 other books from a variety of publishers. You can find me I'm in Skeptical Inquirer magazine. I have a column in there. I'm also on YouTube, of course. And I'm also the co-host of a podcast called Squaring the Strange with Pascual Romero and Celestia Ward. So if people are interested, they can check out Squaring the Strange. And that's what I do. And I love hearing from people. And I really enjoy talking to people like Mike and Tiffany. I wish there was more respectful discussions and diplomatic interactions. I think it's that too often paranormal research in particular is too polarized. And I think at the end of the day, we're all on the same side, really, because we're trying to find good evidence. So I want to thank you, and also thank the other guests for having me on.
I agree 100%. That's why I'm having this show. I can't stand it either, Ben. It's bad. So yeah, thanks for coming on, buddy. Check out that stuff. Tiffany, go ahead and plug away. Do you want people to follow your work? Do you want them to know how to get a hold of you?
Yeah, you can find me at Mason the Medium. And that's my website, so masonthemedium.com. You can also email me at masonthemedium@gmail. And my Facebook page is Mason the Medium. All original, I know. I look forward to doing public readings for you, private readings, reading parties, what have you, or just send me a message if you have any questions.
Awesome. Again, thank you for coming on. You were great. You did fantastic. And hopefully we get, these panel positions covered, because it's a little nerve-wracking putting yourself out there on a show like this, right? You don't know what to expect. You don't know if, Ben was going to come on and just hammer you, and you.
Yes. Well, see, so I've done shows, but it's never been video. Like I've done ParaX Radio and different other podcasts and stuff. But when you're like, oh, we're going to go live and we're going to have a video, and oh, by the way, there's Skeptic, I was like, wah, wah. But thank you, Ben, for dispelling that preconceived notion. And thank you, Justin, for having me on the show. I look forward to maybe sometime meeting y'all in person.
Definitely.
Yeah, I only live an hour and a half away from you, so that should definitely be feasible. Mike, plug.
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, if you're on YouTube right after this show, shoot over to the Haunted Road Media YouTube channel and subscribe there as well. You can also check us out, hauntedroadmedia.com. It has all of not only my books, but books from all of our authors out there. My stuff, of course, can be found at mikericksecker.com. I don't have any of my books handy. They're all over there. packed away right now, kind of like Ben had, but I do have the coffee here. Haunted Road Roast. Hope you hunt ghosts. So we do have coffee too, which can be found at hauntedroadmedia.com. Yeah, it's a lot of fun actually. So yeah, kind of like like Ben and Tiffany were saying, really appreciate this Justin coming on here, and both Ben and Tiffany, you're very good sports and very respectful, and I definitely appreciate that, because in a lot of ways it could have gone wrong, but it actually was very good. So.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm glad too. It's my third episode. I'm always like, I've seen Ben on radio and podcasts. I was pretty sure about him. I'm sure about you, Tiffany. I just intuitively knew that she was going to be fine. And so far, so good.
Well, thanks, guys.
All right. Thank you, all three of you, for coming on. Like I said, you're great. Wonderful discussion. I'm going to wrap the show up. If you want, you can hang out on the video call. If you got to split, and I'll talk to you later. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up. All right. Here we go, guys. Episode 3 was great. We're going to talk about some links that I'm going to promote here, but some of the links that they just plugged are in the video description. Okay, so check those out. You don't have an excuse not to check them out. We need to promote these guys' work. They work very hard and diligently to pursue not only their passion, but what they believe. And as long as we can support these type of people and have these type of discussions, there's no reason for all of us to get along, despite how diverse our opinions are on the matters. I think we can find common ground, so that's what this show's about. So thank you for watching. Let's check out some of these links. Of course, we're live casting on Live Paranormal on Facebook. You can check out liveparanormal.com. You can see all kinds of content they have, all the shows they got going on, all their updates and news. Check them out. You can check out my website for the paranormal field research we do at interfacedeath.net. You can follow Live Paranormal on Facebook. If you're not on Facebook right now, you can check out our Patreon link that we'll talk about here in a moment. You can follow Interface Death on Twitter and Instagram. Patreon is the reason why I'm able to do this content, find time and the money and the drive to do it. So if you want to make sure this stuff stays, grows, and continue, people like Clay Borman, RJ Murphy, Danette Goldtrip, Scotty Fox, Casey Schreiner, Jessica Bias, Bill Davis, Joe Vitale, and Heather Elliott, they are making sure this content's here, staying where it is, and progressing. So without their continued support, I couldn't put this stuff together and keep going. So thank you very much for doing that. And there's where I'm going to leave it. Stick around. We're going to show some of the same video promotions if you did not see them halfway through the show. Thank you very much for joining us again. The 17th, I'm going to have 3 more brand new people, a skeptic, a psychic, and an investigator, and we're going to talk about something else involving the paranormal. Necromancer Live Show is a thing I do every Wednesday at 8 p.m. on Interface Death YouTube channel and on the Facebook page, Necromancer Live Show. And I have a blog show on my personal blog on Facebook and on YouTube tomorrow night at 8 p.m. called My Paranormal Soapbox. So you want to check that out, you can do so. You guys have a good night. Stick around for those video promotions, and I'll see you next time.
something over here. What the fuck, dude? That's weird.
You didn't do anything, right?
No, it just turned.
Was Justin too close?
No,
No, he opened that door and it went off.
Yeah, exactly.
Did you just run out of there?
Side effects of prolonged isolation, paranoia, depression, helplessness, brain stimuli decreases. Now, what happens when you put a man isolated in 3 paranormal infested buildings for 3 nights in each location, all by himself? No one to help me. No one to protect me. Just me versus you. Does paranormal activity increase?
So what do you think of this piece of evidence?
I think by far it's the best piece of evidence we have seen here.
That's flat out amazing. And that's something we've never captured.
Oh, wow.
What? Nobody has ever got it on video.
That's creepy.
In 11 years.
So no one's ever caught this on video?
Never.
Ever.
Here is my story, and here is what I went through for my research into the paranormal. Push the door, please.